Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order this Wednesday, October 18th, 2023 meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the Pierce County Council. It is 9:34 a.m. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Councilmember Campbell.
Here.
Councilmember Krueger.
She's on the way.
Excused.
Councilmember Denson.
Here.
Councilmember Hitchin.
Here.
Councilmember Herrera.
Here.
Councilmember Morell.
Excused.
And Councilmember Mello.
Here. And
And we have
Councilmember
6 members present.
Coover is here. We have 6 members present and a quorum. Item number 3 is approval of our agenda. This morning we have the Human Resources Department to present on their 2024-2025 budget recommendations. And later this morning we'll have the Parks and Recreation Services Department to do the same. Is there any objection to approving the agenda as presented? Not seeing any, the agenda will stand approved. Item number 4 does bring us to the Human Resources Department proposed biennial budget. Mr. Boki.
Thank you, Chair Mello, Paul Boki, Council staff. This morning we have the Human Resources Department. The Human Resources Department is a general fund department. It can be found in your budget book under the General Government tab, which is Section 5, and it begins on page 24. You do have the decision packet. The decision packet is their portion of the decision packet is on page 2 of 5. There's a number of items in there. A number were approved by and included in the executive's budget, and there are a couple of items that were not approved. I'm sure they'll discuss those items. Without further ado, then, Mr. Chairman, I'll send it back to you. We have Ms. Judy Archer, the Director of Human Resources, here to go through her PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you. Director Archer, good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Morning. We will height adjust this. Ooh. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to speak with you today about our budget. Human Resources is a centralized service at the county, so we provide HR support, recruitment support, training support for all the executive branch departments, also the assessor treasurer and the auditor. And then voluntarily, we provide support to other elected offices as well. So we've helped council with their recruitments. So we help where we're asked to help. But our scope is broad, and the body of work that we do is fairly broad as well. So when I considered our budget, I realized that if we do our job well, then the council and the executive are able to do their priorities well, because we are the ones who are working to bring the best people to the county, retain the best people, and motivate them by the work environment that they're in to do their best body of work. So this is our current organizational chart. I have with me today here, Lisa Hillegas, our Assistant Director of HR, who is Employee Relations and Labor. I have online Kelly Lewis, Assistant Director of HR, who is responsible for class and compensation and recruitment. And then Candace Thomas, who's my Administrative Program Manager. So she oversees all the people who touch every single workday transaction that comes in and out related to people, as well as the budget. I think this slide is fairly self-explanatory, and we've been in front of you fairly frequently in the last year talking about things that we do, so I'm going to let it stand on its own 2 feet and answer questions later if I haven't talked to something that you are interested in, because a lot of these things will show up later in the presentation. Next. And this is the breakup. We have 31.8 FTEs in Human Resources, and they're fairly well distributed among all the different divisions, so each group is fairly well supported. we have identified 3 critical needs or challenges facing us in the next biennium. The first is labor and employee relations. Human Resources is responsible for making sure that we are compliant with federal law, state law, local laws, case law, Supreme Court decisions as they affect the employees and the way we process things. So since 2018, we've had 10 Washington state law changes in addition to all the others. So it creates a great body of work. And the Labor and Employee Relations team not only does that, but they bargain 21 collective bargaining agreements, and they help with employee relations concerns, performance concerns with our over 3,700 employees. And 81% of those are regular employees or limited duration, and then 19% are our extra hires who stay less than 6 months when they are here. The second challenge we have is around organizational development and training. I know that it is a priority of yours and a concern that we retain the best talent when we get them. And part of that is offering them opportunities to grow and develop and have a career here at the county. So that is our second challenge, is making sure that we are offering opportunities that will, and that they can see that. So working more on clear career paths in job families as well as more broadly. We have had a leadership development program for the last 2-3 years, bronze, silver, and gold leadership classes, and then you get a certification. What also comes with getting bronze level leadership is you belong to a cadre, and every month they have a meeting where they do something different about leadership development to keep it in their forefront, in their thoughts, guest speakers. I know I've participated in one where we had Roxanne also on women leadership and what that looks like, and that we all have imposter syndrome, and that's a consequence of what goes on. So having that ongoing conversation about leadership, one of the things that I think is unique at the county is you don't have to currently be a leader to take the leadership development. If you're interested in becoming a leader, you can take leadership development and be a better peer leader, or be preparing yourself so that when an opportunity comes forward to become a supervisor, you can say, I have the skills. I've invested in myself. I made sure that I'm ready to become a formal supervisor by taking care of this in advance. The other things that come with that program is an opportunity for mentorship. And we have employees here who not only are mentored by somebody else above them in the organization, but also mentor others below them. And it's a pretty robust group and opportunity for employees. They can also job shadow. So it gives a lot to current employees, and it's also very attractive to candidates that there's this investment in them and growing in the future. And we do this all with a DEI lens, because we want to make sure that everyone is feeling like they're welcome here and that they have opportunities to grow. And it's not just because somebody is the favorite of their supervisor, but that those opportunities are spread throughout the entire group. And the last challenge that we're facing is recruitment, which is on the news all the time. We thought maybe we were getting a little bit of a reprieve because the economy was slowing down, so that means that employers won't hire, and then they added 336,000 new jobs in September. Not slowing down. So we continue to have a need to recruit, to find the best, to find passive candidates. We no longer can post and pray and hope that when we look at the candidates, there's somebody good there. One of the ways we do that is by doing community outreach, not just job fairs, but going to communities that aren't well represented in our employee population, making them aware of what the work is that we do at Pierce County, that we do really cool stuff, and that those opportunities are available for them. So in 2022, we did over 22 career fairs and community events, and for 2023, we're on target to do over 70. So really getting out in the community, having conversations with people who just come by the booth to see what we're talking about and why we're there. And then we can bring them in and talk about the work that we do. And when you think about it, there's a lot. It's very wide and broad, the work that's done at the county. So there are lots of opportunities that people wouldn't have ever thought of being available. So our priorities for this next biennium, number one, DEI and leadership development, which I just talked about, that we're investing in making sure that people grow and develop here at the county. The second one is continuous improvement on customer service, which includes automation. So taking all those paper forms that we used to have, we've got a great system in Workday, and we're putting things in there. So for instance, if you need to take leave, now you just go in there and do it right in the system for FMLA leave, which used to involve having a big packet of paper and filling it out and sending it in. All our forms are going on to Cognito, so it's a fill-inable form when they're asking for a reclassification or one of those things that they need to provide a lot of information in. So just trying to improve how we serve folks and minimize the amount of time they have to spend in accessing HR needs, and then minimize the amount of time we have to spend in just processing paper. The third priority is the big one: hire, develop, engage, retain talented and diverse employees. Big body of work. One of the ways we're doing that, we talked about doing community outreach. We're also using LinkedIn Recruiter platform to find passive candidates. We can no longer wait for somebody to come looking for us. We go out for high-level positions as well as hard-to-fill positions, and a supervisor can say to the recruitment team, somebody who has this experience, somebody who's worked here, somebody's done this, those would be good candidates. And they can go out and look at people on LinkedIn, and 79% of all job seekers are out on LinkedIn right now, and they can message them and say, hey, we've got an opening here at Pierce County. You look like you might be a good match. Want to talk about it? And develop that and engage them. So some examples of people you might know that we sourced on LinkedIn as passive candidates are Jen Tatson and Constance White. So that is high-level examples, but we use that if we're looking for engineers or other positions that are hard to fill. Very powerful. And the fourth priority is to ensure that pay ranges are market competitive and equitable. And so those of you who've been here for a while, I know Councilmember Campbell was here for Siegel Study 1 and Siegel Study 2, and it creates kind of this thing where you're, the study's coming, it's at spot in time. Okay, now we're waiting for the next study, it's coming, spot in time. We're bringing that work in-house. And with the support of IT, we're building our own database. The goal is to annually update our knowledge about where we're at competitive-wise, market-wise with pay in the first quarter of every year, be able to provide responsive information about where our compensation is at. And as I said, it was kind of this study thing with Siegel. The goal is to take out some of the volatility in the job market as well by being able to look at trends over time, looking at a 3-year trend in that job. Is it trending up? Is it trending down? If it's a consistent trend up, then we need to be responsive. So some consistency and long-term strategy now in how we do class and comp. We only have 4 decision packages, so it's a small amount compared to some of my peers. In order of priority, the first and most important to us is the Human Resources Specialist, FTE. That is in collaboration with the Sheriff's Department. So within HR is the Civil Service Division, which back in the day was 4 people and has been 1 person since I came to the county. It's a large volume of work. They interact with Sheriff's Department candidates, tell them about how to get tested, how to enter the system, help with medical, all those kinds of things, paperwork, as well as doing all the promotional testing for the Sheriff's Department. There's a big emphasis on hiring, and it's become a pinch point. We just aren't able to process everything to the level that we would like to. The other thing is candidates expect today to be communicated with and to not wait a month before they find out what's going on. And so the leadership team in the Sheriff's Department is doing a lot of that work. They're dividing up candidates and trying to call them and keep them warm, but there's only so much hours in the day for them to be able to do that stuff. So that's one of the things this position would do is when somebody passes the test, they can give them a call and say, hey, you passed the test and I see you want to come to Pierce County. We'd love to have you. And the next thing you can expect is this. And then the follow-up call when they're expected to get it, so that by the time we go through the important and lengthy process of screening candidates and are ready to make an offer, they haven't taken a position somewhere else because they didn't think we weren't interested in them. So that is the purpose for our Human Resources Specialist, FTE. Our second ask is for LinkedIn recruiting. We've had that for 3 years now, but it was not flagged as an ongoing, so we need to ask for it again. As I mentioned, it allows us to do searches for passive candidates. The other thing it does, and I don't know if any of you are on LinkedIn, but if you are, you probably have seen different members of our leadership team posting jobs that are in their teams and inviting people to reach out to them to talk to them about that. So Jen does a great job of that. Hey, I've got an opening in my department. Candidates today want accessibility to who their supervisor is going to be, what the leadership is about, and LinkedIn gives us the ability to do that. And I get contacted by candidates, hey, I want to know about this or what about that. So it's a very valuable tool, and it is cost effective. So a high leadership level recruitment done by an outside recruiter would be $30,000 to $50,000. A engineer kind of recruitment would be about $20,000. And we have not paid for any of that in the last 3 years since we got LinkedIn. We do our own recruitments and we don't incur the costs of outside recruiters because we have the tools and the skills to do it ourselves. Our third decision package is LinkedIn Learning. It offers us a variety of things. One is it adds to productivity. So if you're taking an instructor-led class and you're physically going to the class, you have to get up and drive there half hour, and drive back afterwards. With the LinkedIn Learning class, you sit down at your computer, you take the class. They're on demand. So if it's better for that employee's schedule to take the class at 3 in the afternoon, they can do that. If it's better for them to take it at 9 in the morning, they can do that. All on demand. We pay a flat fee for it regardless of how much we utilize it. So it's a known steady cost. We've had over 1,200 of our employees engage on LinkedIn Learning in the last year and take classes. We use it for prerequisites for our instructor-led classes. So to teach core concepts, to teach principles. Somebody might take 1 or 2 LinkedIn Learning classes and then have a facilitator-led class, which allows us to have a smaller training staff and not be asking for more FTEs on training because we've maximized the value of an in-person instructor, even though it's virtual, by utilizing LinkedIn Learning. The third reason why LinkedIn is important is it is truly equitable. So if you're interested in taking a class and it would better prepare you for your current job, you can ask your supervisor and do that on county time as your schedule allows. But if you're interested in growing in a way that is different than your current role, so your supervisor isn't going to approve you watching videos on that, LinkedIn Learning is available to our employees off the clock. So they can watch at home on the weekend something that will help them grow and develop and is important and they want to invest in themselves. So that makes available career-changing learning to every employee without having to go through a gatekeeper to get it. And our last decision package that we have is for the Employee Incentive and Recognition Program, EINR, and that is the in-person event that we hold every fall coming up on November 1st this year, where we recognize our Standing Ovation Award, so the innovation that happens at the county, and our Long Service Award employees as well. So really important recognition piece that we do.
I'm going to ask you to pause here so that we could ask some questions about what we've heard so far, including the decision package requests. We'll start with Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you. Drilling down a little bit on the LinkedIn recruiting and management platform. So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not on it much. It's not my primary social media. And I hear you talk about how you have department directors or just human resource people posting the jobs and people kind of finding it that way. But is LinkedIn, and who's able to see if you post a job on your personal LinkedIn that says, hey, we're hiring for this assistant, it's all your friends in your network that can see it?
Mm-hmm. And we also have a web page there as well. So if somebody wants to go look at Pierce County.
How do we get beyond those existing networks? I mean, I think, and
Well-
I haven't done an analysis of my network, but they probably largely are more white and, more this neighborhood so how do we get
But
to
that's
the people who are not, I mean, we have a bias there because it's not all-encompassing in its approach.
So we have the recruiter seats as well as part of what we pay for there. And that's where they can go look for somebody that's a civil engineer, somebody that has experience in large municipalities. And they can look nationwide. And they go looking for all the talent, including the diversity piece, which is, for example, how we found Constance. She was in Texas. Lindsay on my team reached out to her and said, have you thought about an opportunity like this? And she said, I had never thought about an opportunity like that. Thank you. Dialogue. So I hear we haven't got the blanket piece, but we certainly are being targeted in searching for people. And then, our recruitments go on Glassdoor and all those kind of platforms that have a lot of diversity in who they.
So I hear how investing in the recruiter can look nationwide for best and brightest at some of these high-level positions. That's great. But when we look at entry level, you're not. Are you spending the money with the recruiters on hiring entry level jobs into our organization?
Yes. So that's where we're out doing community event. Black Bite of Tacoma or whatever, they were there not as, because it was a recruitment event, but because it was a community that we're not in front of very often. We look at what's the breakdown, are we hitting all kinds of different diversities? Are we making, we participate in the district courts recruitment events as well, different group of folks. So we're really trying to get over the biases that people have about the county, that you can only work here if you have a family member or a friend, that you can get a friend at Pierce County by making friends with a recruiter at an event where you're already at. So we are doing that. We have a large number of community organizations that we send our postings to every week and encouraging them to send candidates our way. We collaborate with them. We rarely, if ever, turn down an opportunity to do interviewing skills development at an organization that is helping people get their foot in the door. So going at it from a lot of different directions.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for those questions. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here this morning. I have two questions. One, the LinkedIn recruiting is in the budget. It's not an additional ask? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And then the second question, on the FTEs, and I don't know if it's just a typo in the budget book, but when I looked at it, I was just trying to figure out, so we have 30 in the current budget for 23, or for 24, 25, it's 31.8? Okay.
But they're all full-time. It's that
Yeah.
2/10 goes
Yeah.
somewhere, I don't know.
Okay, so, because it lists 6.8 labor and employee relations staff, and then 7 employee support services staff, and then 6, and like, so when I added it up, I came up with way more than 31.8, so I just didn't know, and I'm happy to.
We may be off one, so Kim, who did the pie chart, put the assistant directors in the admin,
Okay,
and then I don't think she took Lisa out of labor and employee relations when she put her in the, but we're off one, but we shouldn't be off.
maybe I'll come stand with you, like, during a break and have you look at it, and you can tell me which of these, because
Yeah.
I was like trying to do the math, and it bugged me. So, thank you. I have additional questions, but they may get answered as you kind of finish up, so we'll let them go on. Thank you.
Councilor Hitchin, I was trying to follow your questions. I'm not sure I was, but so in the budget book, right now there's 31.8 FTEs, and in the next biennium it says 31. I'm just careful. I don't know if you have this in front of you. I don't want to make sure you're able to follow.
Okay, so
So in the current FTE count for your division, it says 31.8. In the next biennium, it says 31.8. And you've asked for an additional FTE as your first priority decision package to support the sheriff's department.
yeah, I think it's a sheriff's department FTE.
Lives in the,
It's,
works for you, accounting for in the
They're
sheriff's
sharing.
department.
Julie's.
Mr. Boki.
I'm working from the budget book. What it appears is that there is a new position of the human resources specialist, and I believe that that's the sheriff's person. But there's a reduction of one, talking sideways here, a reduction of one human resources analyst, so it goes from 5 in 2023 to 4
I
in
see.
2024.
Yeah.
And that position that had to do with the sheriff's department too, yeah.
Okay.
So it's just a switch of positions.
well, it's a limited duration position that ends this year.
So this human resources specialist that is focused on sheriff's department recruitment, they work, I know you're a general service, you're a service provider. Do they work for you or do they work for the sheriff's
They
department?
would work for us, and they would report to the civil service examiner, one of our employees.
And can you remind us today, how many FTEs do you have dedicated to supporting the sheriff's department, HR, including recruitment?
So dedicated, we have one civil service person, and the limited duration recruiter is doing some work around recruiting for the sheriff's department as well.
So this would add one additional person dedicated to this purpose. Thank you. Councilman Krueger.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your information. Appreciate that. I'm wondering, on the LinkedIn Learning, you have the DEI and technical training. What is the technical part of the training from LinkedIn?
There are technical skills. I think it's got software and those kinds of skills that you can learn on there, as well as soft skills.
So like in computer programming and understanding Excel more, things like that, kind of a thing? And then
Looking for Raul.
And the DEI training, so does that focus on just the aspects of that? Because when I've looked at it, and I see it more as efforts to make behavior changes in people's attitudes and feelings, and I'm wondering, is that the focus?
No,
Okay.
not behavior changes, other than being a good collaborator, having good conversations, those kinds of things.
Okay. That's not what I took from the one I was looking at, but I'll look again. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Hitchin and I were just doing some quick math up here. Always dangerous to do. Looks like the FTE count for 2025, according to these numbers, should be 43.6 FTEs. It says 31.8 in the budget book. We can confirm in the during the break. Again, trouble doing math in real time here. Any other questions on decision packages? Director, I did wanted to ask, in your FTE count, you do have 3 people dedicated right now in the organizational structure to organizational development and equity.
Yes.
One of the decision packages that was not recommended for funding by the executive is adding a DEI training and knowledge transfer specialist to provide DEI training to our county employees and act as a project manager for various DEI work groups in the county. We can't fund everything. There's a lot
Okay.
of asks from every department. We know that better than anybody. We want to fund a lot of things. But we want to know, we take this very seriously, and we have to make tough choices. So does the executive. So totally understand that. And diversity, equity, and inclusion is incredibly important to this council. What doesn't happen if we don't fund that request that department made?
What will happen is and Raul's here, he can talk to it as well, but we're pivoting on doing less instructor-led training and we have a kind of PowerPoint on steroids, Articulate 360, where we can do our own standalone pre-recorded modules. So we'll be looking at doing focused ones of those to get a lot of that content communicated out in an accessible way. We are going to look at other ways to support the chairs of the different DEI work groups with some clerical support so that they can, because most of them are assistant directors and managers in HR and could use some extra support as they try and keep those work groups going. But we've come up with a plan, Raul's come up with a plan on being able to get the work done and not stopping anything, because we agree it's extremely important.
Always, departments are asked to do more with less. So that's what I hear your answer to be. You just mentioned in your response to that question about Articulate 360. That's another decision package that's not funded. It's a small amount of money, $19,600.
We're going to absorb it.
You're going to absorb it.
We'll find a way.
You'll
to
figure
do it.
out. It sounds like it's an important tool for
Yeah.
the delivery of your program. You will absorb it as the answer.
Yes.
And then one other question about your decision packages. In here, your department has done a really great job of reinvigorating and leading an internship program here at Pierce County, providing young people paid internship experiences during the summer in several different departments, including here at the Office of the County Council. There was a decision package to increase wages for 12 interns throughout county government. Small amount of money, but can you just remind us what is the compensation for the interns in the program today?
Does anybody know? I want to say it's like $20 an hour.
About $20 an hour, is that the
Yeah,
answer?
$20.
And this would have raised it to,
$1 or $2 an hour.
I'm just trying to keep up with inflation,
Yeah.
kind of. Just-
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Again, it's a really great program. We've seen the benefits and really enjoy seeing those professional experiences develop over the summer. Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking up Articulate 360. I'm not quite certain what I'm looking at. Can you kind of over brief on?
Yeah, so it is very similar to PowerPoint in that you can create a slide deck,
Okay.
but you can embed videos into it, you can do voiceover over it, and you can embed knowledge checks in the middle of it.
Knowledge checks?
Yeah, so you cover a body of information and then you say ABC, which is the right answer, and so you can make sure that the person is following along and gotten the content from the first section before you move to the second section.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Something that I think Councilmember Coover can relate, all of us can relate to in that regard. Like, we all have to take the Open Public Meetings Act training online or the Public Records training online. It's a very similar tool. They make sure we're paying attention to the video and answering the questions along the way. I think we're ready for you to move on, Director.
All right, next slide, which we've already talked about, which is the one FTE we're asking for. And then next, diversity, equity, and inclusion. How did we apply the principles to our budgeting process? We made sure that we weren't cutting programs, and we were thoughtful about where we were paring stuff off. We looked at our prior budgets to see where money had been left at the end of the year. I think it's a universal when you do a household budget that you over-plan for every contingency and then find you didn't need all of what you set aside. So looking at historical information, but also making sure that we weren't jeopardizing any of the newer programs we're doing that are around getting more diverse candidates into the door and making sure that we're growing and developing our existing employees here at the county. As far as programs we've implemented to advance equity considerations, talk a little bit about this list. Employee resource groups kicked off at the beginning of the year. We have 4 currently, but we should have some more coming up. They're not something that people are just going to come flocking to initially because they're kind of scared. You're putting yourself out there that you belong to a group or you're an ally of a group, and that can be hard. But the intent is, and their goals are around career development, opportunities, networking, meeting people with common interests and information. And so those are going to continue to grow, and we continue to be committed to them. Outreach and community event team and the training cadre. So both of these are examples of how we did more without getting any more. So we opened up to the county for volunteers that were interested either in doing community outreach or in doing training. Those who volunteered got their supervisor approval. The supervisor understands that they are agreeing for a limited commitment of spending a little bit of time doing either community outreach or training. We train them up, get them prepared for those opportunities, and then they might join a recruiter out. The OSET team might join, somebody from there might join a recruiter at an event, so we only have to send one HR person and they're joined. Like, think about if we're doing a career fair or a community event near one of our wastewater treatment plants. Wouldn't it be great if we had somebody from the wastewater treatment plant there to talk to people about what's going on in their community? Fun fact about going virtual with COVID is it only took one instructor to teach an in-person class. It takes 2 to do a virtual class because one person pays attention to the faces and the other one manages the chats and comments and technical issues and does all of that. So the training cadre folks do that second production and over time get a class, and they may teach a class that is theirs as well over time. But it allows us to add a wider variety of faces to the training that we offer here at the county too. So we have 2 full-time trainers and Raul, but with the training cadre, we have many, many more faces that employees see while we're doing training. Legal and effective interviewing. I lead I-Team. Legal and effective interviewing is pretty robust. It talks not only about best practices in recruitment, but also pitfalls and bias that may show up in your interviewing that you're doing. It is required for all people who sit on an interview panel so that we, A, are avoiding risk and making sure that they don't ask things they shouldn't ask, but also that they come at that work thoughtfully and try and leave some of their baggage and implicit bias behind them as they look at candidates. I lead and I team our new offerings that'll be coming out, inclusive leadership and inclusive team member training to help employees work with people that aren't always exactly the same as them and be open to that and how to be effective and how to create great teams. Because diversity has lots of positive outcomes, but not if the person doesn't feel comfortable sharing their perspective and their information. So those are focused at that. We continue to add to Open Pierce County and the recruitment metrics out there. We want to be transparent and also keep on looking at our data and making sure that we're improving. I think since the time the executive came in office, roughly there, we've increased the diversity of the employee population by 4%, which doesn't sound huge, but when we have employees that say 25, 30, 35, 40 years, we don't. And we have 100, 150 recruitments a year. For regular employees, we don't have a lot of chance to move that, and so want to continue to do that and keep that information at forefront. Bargaining fair and equitable labor contracts, making sure that we listen to our labor partners as they talk about their needs and what they're looking for, and that we are thoughtful. Ongoing work with our 4 DEI work groups and our, what we refer to as SOC, Strategic Oversight and Coordination Committee, and that ongoing DEI work that those groups are doing. The new thing, and I think you might have seen this in a couple of the budget presentations have already seen or will see, is supported employment. At the county, we really have not done much about neurodiversity, and it's an untapped resource for skilled talent. So supported employment is for developmentally disabled people, and not giving them a handout, but having them do work that we need to have done here at the county, but taking it off of somebody that could have doing higher level work and get that support from somebody in supported employment. The other thing that we're going to be looking at in the next biennial budget is just neurodiversity in general. So I've seen the statistic that somewhere between 80 and 87% of all neurodiverse people, so think people on the spectrum, are unemployed or underemployed, so that have college degrees. So these are people that are qualified. They have college degrees, and they're not finding a way to fit in. Maybe in-person interviews or interviews with their camera on is the barrier, and they just can't feel comfortable enough to do that. Maybe they need a little bit different work environment that's quieter, those kinds of things. So we're going to look at best practices and ways that we can tap into that valuable pool of highly skilled people that are out there waiting for an opportunity. Next. Steps we've taken to ensure that our budget doesn't cause a disproportionate impact on any particular group. And again, we looked at where we were taking budget reductions and made sure that we were not cutting services to any particular group. You know, we did a lot of, again, looking at what we hadn't spent before, but some fun things like we hardly use any paper anymore. So we don't need a huge budget for paper. We're trying to be paper-free and electronic, so those are the kinds of things that we're looking to cut and not services or programs to attract candidates. And how have we considered underserved communities or the BIPOC community? We have an employee engagement survey that we do every year that we look at that contains some specific DEI questions, as well as the 12 Gallup poll, how to measure a engaged workforce that are statistically validated. We look at those. Raul has also gone and done one-on-ones with each director to go over their results for their department, again, to look to make sure that we are keeping an engaged workforce. We do a DEI, or communications work group does a DEI survey every other year, so we look at those as well in the comments to come, because that comes from our employees, so that's their experience, that's what they're talking to. this information then informs what we do and how we train, as well as how we change our programs. And we have the DEI work groups, which have a diverse group of employees from all different departments, and we listen to their input at their regular monthly meetings and what they'd like to see changed and what they suggest that we do differently. And this is my last slide, and this is where we took our deductions. And again, we didn't cut programs or cut anything in mass. We put things on a diet and tried to thoughtfully think where we could cut, but also where we have probably over budgeted in the past and got a little more strategic about it. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Director Archer. Questions about anything we heard this morning from Human Resources Director? We'll start with Councilmember Coover.
Thank you, Chair. The DEI work groups, are they open to anyone attending?
Yes.
Okay. And I think were the times noted in,
They are not for the DEI work groups, but the chairs are listed in there, and you could contact them, and they could tell you when they're meeting.
oh, so they don't have a set time, like the first Monday at noon or something?
They may, but I don't, off the top of my head, know what it is.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Denson.
Yes, thank you, Director Archer. I just want to say I really appreciate your work in regards to moving people through the process for the Sheriff Department, because I know that can be overwhelming for some people and discouraging, just understanding how long it takes. And as an example, I had a constituent maybe a month ago that was interested in a maintenance job. Park maintenance job, but sorry, Director Miles, I was like, he's a young person, he's a member of the BIPOC community, and I said, well, we know you could do the maintenance, but have you considered corrections? You know, I thought it would be a nice career path for this individual given his background. And he looked into it and he's like, oh my gosh, it's going to take 2 months. Not only does it take a long time and he needed a job now, but there's no guarantee at the end of 2 months that he's going to get that job. So we just discounted it right away. So the fact that you're moving people through faster and the Sheriff Department is doing those warm touches is important. I'm just wondering if there's, I'm sure you're thinking about this, some creative ways that we can get some of these individuals into jobs now, because they need to be making money now, while they're working through the process, maybe towards a career that will give them more of a living wage, a better career path. If they're interested, I think we need, given the shortage that we have in the Sheriff Department, and I think there's a broader market for corrections than deputies on the street, how can we help these folks? Because it's just people here 2 months, especially as a young person, and that's forever for them.
So as I mentioned, we have 19% of our employees are extra hires, which is 6 months or less. And that, I used to think that would be seasonal, like, oh, it's the summer when we're working on roads, but it stays pretty flat year round. So we always are having those opportunities. And in fact, they have a lot of those opportunities now where they do mass hiring events. They just did one and they offered 31 jobs at the event or immediately thereafter. Like, you go in, you show up, you interview, you find out if you've got the job. So if somebody's not working now, that's a great stopgap, is to go and help Roxanne, get a parks maintenance position as an extra hire. Because if they're working, we don't want them to leave that job until they're for sure coming on the Sheriff's Department, but certainly extra hire positions are great opportunities to, again, if the Sheriff's Department thing didn't work out, they would be building relationships in a group that they would like to work in.
So are we talking, I assume we're talking to our extra hires about other opportunities in the county, like here's your track if you want to be working on testing for the Sheriff Department or any number of other opportunities we have so that they can be kind of working towards their end goal.
Yep.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Herrera.
Thank you, Chair. And great questions there. That made me think a little bit. I remember in the military, like if some people who signed up for the military for like the Ranger Battalion, and they went to the Ranger School, and it didn't work out for them, they would slide them over to another section within the military where they can move into. So that's a way to talk about that. My question was a little bit on the budget reductions and bring my closer. My question was a little bit on the budget reductions. I see a lot of them there, and I appreciate what you said about you took a look at maybe over budgeting and things like that. Mine was particular for the labor employee relations. You had like 63,000 for one year, and then 53 on another. What particulars on that part was cut?
So,
Employee position or?
no, it wasn't a
time?
position.
Okay.
It was, we have money set aside because we do not have skill for doing badged arbitrations. So if somebody in the sheriff's department were to file an unfair labor practice charge, or we were to be bargaining their contract and go to impasse and have to go to arbitration, we use an outside attorney's firm for that specializes in that body of work. And so we have money set aside for those costs. Last budget cycle, we didn't use it at all. We want to have some. Our current badge contracts go till the end of 2024, but there is a chance that in bargaining that next one, we might go to impasse and have to use an outside attorney to help with that bargaining.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. I think my biggest question is around employee retention, especially new employees that come on. Is there some intentional work or thinking about how we're going to track the longevity of these careers, especially as we're changing our hiring practices? We need to be able to say this is working because they're staying for more than 1 or 2 years. They're staying and moving up the different positions and pathways you've created. So is that part of the metrics you're looking at and the data that's being?
That is part of what we're looking at. What we're doing right now is the executive meets with every new hire group that comes in and talks to them for 45 minutes about the core values of the county and what culture he expects to have here. That, he expects it to be a culture of respect, and he expects that they're going to be welcomed and valued in their work groups. And then at about 90 days, they get offered an opportunity for all those employees to have a follow-up meeting, group meeting with him, and share how that experience has been. Did the group you went into match the culture I said I expected to have here? Did you feel respected? Did you feel valued? Was there hitches? So through that process, we found some hitches sometimes. My computer wasn't set up on time. I had trouble enrolling in benefits, those kinds of things. So we're looking at the short run, and then Raul's looking as we go further, why are people leaving if they're leaving in the short run, and what are those things that we can fix?
Okay, thank you. And then my other question around some of the metrics you're collecting, one of them is the percent of employees receiving diversity training, which is fantastic, and I love that you're setting higher goals than what we've done before. But is that just they took one of the the LinkedIn trainings count as that?
And we have some instructor-led as well that count as that, too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. For the record, Councilmember Morel has joined us. Councilmember Krueger. Good morning, Councilmember Morel. Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Chair. This really isn't the budget thing, but I just have to ask, what is imposter syndrome? Never heard of it.
That I don't feel that I should be here in this role because I am not as good as other people that are in that role. So it is, I think it's a universal feeling for anybody that gets to a point in their career where it's like, wow, look where I am. But if they really knew who I was or that I'm not as good as they think I am. And so you feel like an imposter. You feel like you don't deserve to be in that role, and it's a very common feeling across the board.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Director, one last set of questions from me. I especially appreciate the measures that are found in Open Pierce County that are mostly related to human resources. We are on track of actually exceeding our target for veteran employment in Pierce County. That is great to see. We have a target of 9.5% veteran employment. We have 10.4% according to Open Pierce County. We are very close to our gender diversity goal. Target is 50%, and we're at 49.9%. 6.1% and trending upwards. Our people of color employees continues to be off track. You've talked a little bit today, answering various questions about strategies that are being employed, but we're still pretty far off track. Comparator County has about a third reflective of the community. A little more than a third of Pierce County residents are people of color. A little more than a third. We have about 25% people of color working for the county. So we're doing well in some other areas. Wanted you to just be able to speak a little bit more to that. It's really important that we have a workforce that reflects the diversity of our community and that our public servants look like the people they're serving. And I also wanted you to be able to speak to the other measure in Open Pierce County that's off track, which is only 61, and this is not all you're doing because you don't supervise every employee, but in Open Pierce County it says 61% of employees receive a performance evaluation. Again, you don't supervise every employee. You're not responsible for every performance evaluation, but you do provide some leadership and tools for every department. So I wanted to hear some reflections from you. The council thinks performance evaluations are very important for everyone's development. So if you could speak to the diversity of the workforce and what, if anything, your division's doing to support other divisions to make sure everybody gets a performance evaluation.
The diversity of the workforce, fun fact, our candidate pool is more diverse than the county is as census data. So we're getting diverse candidates in the door, which is awesome. And now we are looking at where do they drop off? Are they underqualified for the positions that they're applying for, so they don't make it through minimum qualifications? Do they not get selected for interviews? Do they not make it through the interview once they get there? And really trying to look at where they're dropping off so that we can get a better understanding of, is there things we can fix? Are we giving the wrong message at the front end and they're applying for things that they're not a good fit for? What are the pieces? So we're hopeful because it is super cool that our candidate pool is more diverse than the county is. Just more work to figure out how to keep it all the way going to the end. On performance reviews, we haven't given it as big a focus as we probably should, to be totally honest. The other thing that is an interesting barrier at the county is different departments are busy at different times of year. And so different departments want to do their performance reviews at different times of the year. Like roads doesn't want to do it in the middle of the winter when they're having to worry about plowing, or when they're paving. And so we have historically left it up to departments to determine when they're going to do their performance review, which eliminates some of the communication that typically would go out that it's November and it's time to do performance reviews and we can track everybody together. But I know Raul and I have been having conversations recently about how can we get that on track and how can we come up with a good communication plan that accommodates the fact that different departments are busy at different times of year and want to do those reviews at different times of year.
Thanks. It's a big county, lots of employees, and can imagine different tools, maybe doing a walk side by side with some employees over an iPad to do the performance evaluation might be a different way of doing it than an office worker or something. So thank you. We think it's really serious for folks' professional development and retention to get feedback, and to make sure that the employees feel supported and that they're getting the appropriate performance evaluation. I don't see any other questions. Director, we want to thank you for taking time to come and explain your budget to us and answering our questions. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to take a 7-minute recess. We're going to come back at 10:40 and come back with Parks and Recreation Services. So we'll be in recess till 10:40. Well, welcome back from the council's morning recess. We are back for Parks and Recreation. For members' information, we're going to get through the Parks and Recreation Services discussion this morning. We're going to then break for lunch. And then, as members know, we have an afternoon committee of the whole with Planning and Public Works round 2. And then we will conclude our day after that. A number of members have to get to the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department board meeting. So another full day. Director Miles, welcome. We're pleased to have you here and very interested to hear your presentation on your biennial budget. Welcome.
Great, thank you. Just dive in. Perfect.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Boki, excuse me.
Oh.
I apologize.
Quite-
Please orient us.
Quite all right. Parks and Recreation in your budget book has its own tab. It is under Parks and Recreation. It is Section 9. It begins on, by my count, there are 11 funds, but I believe the Chambers Creek one falls under the sewer utility. So there are 10 funds, and it's quite a, it goes from the general fund Parks and Recreation account to construction funds, parks impact fees. So there's special revenue funds, there's capital funds in a number of areas, and this also includes conservation futures and the conservation futures capital fund. So there are a number of items under the parks presentation. And that,
Thank you for that important orientation. A lot of paperwork being oriented to where we can follow along with the director. Director Miles, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Roxanne Miles, Director for Pierce County Parks and Recreation. Very happy to be here with you this morning to give an update on the department and share what is included in the executive's proposed budget that is before you. Do want to mention that I have members of my leadership team who are online. They're going to be happy to answer questions if you want to get into some details. And also Tom Utterback, who is the chair of the Park Citizen Advisory Board, is here as well. So we're happy to present and go over the materials that you asked for and to entertain questions. So with the next slide, it is highlighting, we've added stars to those areas that you have listed as your budget priorities, that we have some information to share with you and talk about how our initiatives move those things forward. We did receive some ARPA funding in the current biennium for a workforce development program, but I don't believe any of that is included in the 24-25 budget proposal. Next, our organizational chart goes a little bit deep, so we've just shown you different categories of how we are divided up. The next slide will help with it as well. We basically have 3 divisions. So you can see the deputy director was really overseeing our park and recreation services area. And then that separates into 4, we call them management regions. There are park and recreation managers that help coordinate all the programs, all the parks, all the services within these 4 different geographic areas of the county. And that group of people do what I call the day-to-day. They are keeping our parks open, clean, safe, available, accessible, and programming them for the community. Resource stewardship really is forward-focused. They help us with caring for our natural lands, getting those natural lands open, the development of new parklands, and strategic planning. And then Parks Administrative Services support our business operations and customer service. The next slide, you can see those responsibilities really broken down into how they are supporting, making sure that we can serve the residents across our very diverse county. We have a lot of unincorporated areas, so some areas are almost purely unincorporated, where others, there's a lot of city, towns, partnerships, and other service providers as well. There's obviously a lot of growth happening in our county, which means there's a lot of demand happening, so our resource stewardship division is very busy trying to keep up with that demand. And then with all those activities comes administration, a lot of contract management, for example. On the next slide, you can see how our staff members are broken out, with 92.56 FTEs currently in the Parks Department. 70% of those, which is 62.66 FTEs. Again, we do not have 2/3 of a body around. What that is that we have a couple 10-month positions that are helping to operate our sport fields. So that's where you get the off number. The 0.56 is because there is a 0.1 of an FTE associated with golf courses that you'll see that we'll talk about trying to resolve that. 15 staff members in resource stewardship, 13 in admin, and then 2 staff members who are marketing staff members who are supported in a link to the communications department. So some of the critical needs and challenges, ultimately, all of these fall into really managing a growing system that has a lot of demand upon it. We have 40 plus different capital and planning projects in the works. This is a system that is getting a lot of growth and demand on it, also had limited investments to keep up with that growth for a number of years. So we are very busy with that and managing 5,200 acres as well. We also have over 10,000 individual assets. That might be a playground structure or a restroom in our site. And as we shared recently at the update, there's about 500 of that 10,000 that are in need of repair. So that's about 5%. It's still more than I like, but it is a lot less than what we have seen before. And so we use our preventative and planned maintenance program in order to sequence out how to resolve all those assets that are out of compliance or coming to the end of their life cycle over the next 5 years. But of course, there will be new assets that, as we assess them, that might join that. But that's definitely an issue for us, our outdated facilities and equipment. We recently were able to put our equipment and fleet onto a life cycle program, So we've made great gains in that. However, with supply chain issues, we haven't gotten all the new equipment that we are ordering in order to keep us pace of where we want to be. We also want better equipment in terms of climate responsiveness and making sure we can get EV equipment as we move forward. You know, societal impact on parks really is a number of demands that we are trying to manage. We'll talk more about that, but obviously misuse, illegal behaviors, unauthorized encampments is something that all public lands have to deal with. So that's one of our critical needs and challenges that we put some solutions forward with. And also with a growing population, that includes more kids, more vulnerable adults that we want to be able to serve well. I think in particular, our programs for youth have been inconsistent. If you recall, you authorized some CARES funding for us to do a Kids Needs to Play summer program. That was hugely popular, but that's been one of our challenges. We've been able to do it for a summer. We've been able to do it for a limited population or a period of time, and we want to be able to resolve that and trying to make sure there's a consistent body of resources and opportunities that are available. We've sought a lot of grant funds, and we've been fairly successful, but also receipt of those funds is not always guaranteed. And if we're going to stabilize a program, we need to overcome that. So that leads then into our department priorities, which are primarily to resolve some of these challenges that we are experiencing. So our priority is to get our park system built out to meet the demands of growth, the changing population. We are now collecting an appropriate level of funding, and we do have a 15-year plan in order to make improvements that we know the areas of growth are happening in. So we will be bringing forth an updated list of capital programs within the next biennium, because we'll be updating our PROS plan, which gives us that 15-year look to bring before you. One of our major needs is around community center improvements, as well as sport fields, and those are not fully funded in the CFP, but they are listed there. So I know some of what was shared is you see some unfunded elements, but part is to advance these projects, get our partnerships lined up so that we know the size and scale of what we will be building and how we might pursue that funding. And this is also, in transparency, positioning us for a bond in a place where we have a number of projects ready that we can actually do at once, and we'll have a repayment plan. But that work will be coming in 26 to 29, and we need to be doing the preliminary work now. I think, as you know, the life cycle of every capital project in general is 3 to 6 years for us. We have usually a year in either outreach with the community because they're helping us design that park, or it might be technical feasibility because we do a lot of work in areas that have protected natural spaces. So we have to work through what is possible for that park and location. We can have 1 to 3 years of permitting because we are working in a natural environment, and then the year of construction. So most of the projects that you see are already in works. We've been doing works this current biennium, or it's setting us up for work in future biennium as well. So we constantly keep moving these projects forward in the queue from planning, design and permitting to construction. And the planners and project managers work closely together to make this happen. We have put, for the second one, $100,000 in the budget as a baseline of scholarship funding so that we can offer that year-round, youth-focused, age 24 and under scholarship fee waiver to allow access to programming at reduced cost for low-income families. This really is a start. We need to stabilize it. We expect to augment that fund with other resources. However, just for reference, that might be $250 per household for 400 households. It's a starting point. We expect and we would hope to be able to be back before you, either this biennium or future bienniums, with information about how well it's utilized, what it's used for, and how we need to grow that fund. We also intend to apply for birth to 25 funds again to be able to do that. The position that we have that we'll talk about shortly is a youth development position that is 75% grant funded right now, but we would be assigning that position the responsibility of managing these scholarships and doing the outreach for youth programming. The other recreation coordinator listed there, rental/specialized recreation. This is supported by grant or by revenue and contract funding. We manage the countywide specialized recreation programs, so we have commitments to other jurisdictions, and they pay the subsidy share of their residents. So we just need to be able to deliver on those contracts. And there is some extra hire funds that we're just moving into this career position because we need to have the consistency. As was mentioned, an extra hire is seasonal or it's 6 months maximum. So the effort to continually rehire those type of positions and to not have a position fill really puts the program at risk. So we're wanting to accomplish that, to fulfill that responsibility. And the piece of the person for Chambers Creek Regional Park with the rentals will allow us to permit and produce more events at the Environmental Services Building, on our sport and event lawn in Central Meadow. And we're getting a number of inquiries for additional events and for producers who want to utilize that space. Hopefully some of you took advantage of Brew 5253 or some of the Sky and Sound events that just happened this year. As mentioned, we do have some ongoing challenges with misuse of public sites, overnight parking, illegal activities, and we have had some pre-scheduled support from law enforcement over the years. But anything that's put out for them to be scheduled to do support at North Taps or at an event is put out on a voluntary and overtime basis. So we haven't had consistency in being able to fill all of those. And then, of course, any on-calls are going to be based on the triage and prioritization that the Sheriff's Department gets. So we have a desire to have some more dedicated and consistent response in order to protect our public lands. We did have some conversations. We are exploring possibilities of sheriff FTEs being assigned. But the pool and the demand and need for deputies is, there's already a gap there and there's other contracts to fulfill. What is in this budget is $125,000 for us to seek 2 officers to be dedicated 40 hours per week, May through September, to be a response unit and something that can support our staff. But also Title 14 you updated last year, and that includes the ability to do citations with monetary fines on site. That is something that these particular officers were seeking, them having the training and the ability to be able to implement doing that, because we think once people have knowledge of that and there's a visibility, we can help get the environment a little bit more safer and people more responsive who might not expect law enforcement to respond right now. We have our plan of action for use of the $125,000. We do not yet, we haven't gotten to a place in our conversations to know for sure that the Sheriff's Department can fulfill that. And as I mentioned on just maximizing things, our fleet and equipment is outdated. We have a great replacement cycle, but we are looking to do those replacement with electric versus gas powered, which means we need the infrastructure. We need to make sure we have the charging stations, that our trucks are equipped to manage that. So we've been putting those things incrementally in place, and we do have funding in the budget to implement the next allotment of those improvements in our fleet orders to be able to have the EV charging stations to get them charged and ready to go, because right now we have more EV fleet than we have charging stations. So we're trying to get those things aligned a little bit. But we do have funding to continue our Washington Service Corps, which do a lot of our natural lands and care of those. And it is a great workforce development. It is very diverse, and we mentor them through the program to make sure at the end of the year they know where they want to go career-wise, and keep fostering that as an avenue to bring folks who are interested in the environment and in parks into the county workforce. I believe you may have got a notice from the CAB, and again, Tom Utterback, the chair, is here. They really looked at all of our priorities and wanted to be sure that you knew that enforcement, as well as consistent access for youth and low-income families, is a priority that they wanted to emphasize in the budget that came forward. Okay?
Director, before you move on to your decision packages, let's pause here to see if there's questions about anything we've heard so far. I just wanted to start with one question, and this is for follow-up. With 10 different funds that support 10 different financial funds that support the Parks and Recreation Department, it's a little difficult, like planning and public works, it's a little difficult to track the FTEs across the organization because there's so many different funds. If you could have your team follow up, please. I think council would like to see by geography, because I think it makes the most sense how we track by, you split the county into 4 geographies. By geography, if you could summarize the FTE function by geography. So how many doing programming, recreation programming, how many doing construction management, how many doing parks maintenance, so the major function areas that you divide staff into by geography. If you could follow up with that, I think that would help us understand your FTE count and how you're spreading resources throughout the service territory.
And if I could, I think slide 3, because the resource stewardship staff and administration staff aren't necessarily spread geographically. The park and recreation staff are, because they're doing the day-to-day in those regions, and we do have staff counts listed, but we can be more specific for you of which are what they're fulfilling and where they're at. And I should have mentioned here that there are asterisks, and those asterisks means that those are new positions that we'll be talking about.
Right, so in the West region,
Yeah.
which most of my district is in, as an example, 16 staff. How many of them are doing recreation? How many are doing parks maintenance? That kind of breakdown, I think, by every
Absolutely.
geography, that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
And I know you spread your construction management team throughout the organization. To the extent you have a count of how many folks in the central region are doing different functions of getting the capital program, if you have that.
Yeah.
Don't need it today, but in follow-up, that'd be great. Councilmember Denson.
Thank you, Chair. Director Miles, I had a couple follow-up questions. You mentioned the PROS plan.
Yes.
So trying to wrap my head around, because I remember working on this with the city of Gig Harbor. When is that due? When does council have to take action on it? A little bit about the timeline. And then could you explain your capacity in terms of, are your planners doing this PROS plan? Are you going for outside consultants? How much is this all going to cost? I mean, not that it's not necessary, but just wanting to know.
Yeah, and what I can't speak to today, well, I'll give you more details, particularly the costs specifically that we've put in the budget, though there is a line item for that in terms of consultant support. The Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan can't be older than 6 years when we submit for grants. And so we have to approve a new one by March of 2026. But the comprehensive nature of it and the public process is why we will be doing outreach and creating the elements throughout 24 and 25. In terms of that, most of 2024 really will be updating the demographics and rewriting the sections, realigning them with the comp plan improvements that we see coming forward, as well as bringing in the Park Impact Fee Working Group recommendations in terms of where we go for capital. It is our sound planning document, which you'll get that piece, right? The Park Impact Fees, you have to determine the projects and how you're going to use them based on sound planning. So this is where we put all the growth projections. This is where we track all the information. So every 6 years, that is robustly updated. And then we'll trigger our next 15-year program. So our strategic planner will be primarily absorbed with that work, working along with some consultants. One of the things we'll talk about shortly is a planner too, because we still have 40 projects that are active, right? So we have master plans and doing that work so that individual projects continue to move forward while we're doing the strategic plan. is how we are looking at having our resources work together.
Thank you, because that kind of got into my second question. We are operating under an existing PROS plan where we have 40-some projects, but this new plan will create a new capital facilities plan with potentially new projects, right? And so I'm wondering what happens to the projects on the plan now, especially the ones that we already have a master plan?
Yes.
How are we moving these forward to getting them done?
Yeah. So it doesn't scrub the prior list, and to be clear, the PROS plan actually goes 15 years, right? So out of that becomes the 6-year CFP, which is in front of you, and then the 2-year budget list. So all of them are in context of the 15 years, and that's really, really important because your fiscal policy, the one adopted by the council that we are following, is really mapped out across that 15 years. How do we project the spending and how do we prioritize projects in order, the growth, the demographics, where are the projects needed? So this update is comprehensive, but it's going to pick up the last one and basically check it against new information and decide whether we need to make adjustments or changes. And it's always helpful to have that 15-year look, especially when we're talking about trails and things that line up with transportation, right? So it really isn't starting over, going back to that point when, the CFP is already telegraphing what's in progress, what's already happened, what's in progress, and what are we starting, right? So we're not normally in a place where we're going to stop doing something that's already in progress, right? We want to finish that investment, but it will now, right now, our current plan goes to 2030. So now we're talking about looking out to 35, 40.
Right, and I know there's a lot of interest in getting some of these done, especially if the master plan has been done a couple of years. Like you said, we've already made investments in it. I have a couple specific questions about the capital facilities plan. Is this the time for it, or are you going to be getting more into it?
We do have a capital section, so maybe
Okay, I'll wait then. All right, thank you.
Thank you. The capital facilities plan details at the end of this presentation. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I really appreciate the overview and looking at how we're spreading out both our people and priorities across the county. I had an in-district meeting at the Parkland Spanaway Library, and Gagne Park came up again. And one of the things that we discussed was the security aspect. So knowing that we have a shortage in deputies, what's the flexibility or use of those dollars to do other things to support that if we can't come to a conclusion with or resolution with our deputies to actually have a dedicated team, which I think sounds better, but I don't know that we get there. And so wondering what we can do in the meantime while we're having this conversation.
Yeah, we mapped a number of options. Obviously, the preferred is a deputy because that's their function. They can cite with Title 14 immediately. If there's criminal activity, they can respond to that, right? They solely have that authority. We can utilize a security firm like the county has. We have already made a number of investments in the built environment in terms of lighting and fences and gates and those type of things, and have more of those planned, but they won't by themselves do what we want to do. So that is, we would have to go to a less desirable solution.
Okay, thank you.
But we have information on those.
Thank you, Director. I think we're ready to move through your decision package recommendations.
Great. Okay. So I know this is the heart of what is distinctly different about this decision, about the decision packages and what we sought approval from and what is changed in the budget before you. And the funding in terms of the dollars have been adjusted. Some of these require FTE approval or change. The top two are our priority basically because we need to keep people whole. We needed to make a general fund reduction and did an analysis of how people were doing things. As was mentioned, we are very complex in terms of our number of different funding sources. For operations and administration, separate from capital and special revenues for capital and separate from conservation futures, right? So we took a look and made a 1.1 FTE reduction out of the general fund And we reassigned .6, which is part of 2 individuals, to the golf course. They do the oversight of the financial reports that come back from our management company. And we've done a lot of work to make sure that the course is operating in such a way that it can cover some of that overhead. And part of that was also moving some positions related to forestry out of the general fund into park sales tax, because that's where the rest of the forestry budget is. So it's also consolidating to make our financial management and reports clearer about what we're investing in forestry and natural lands overall. We also made some adjustments. We did that same task analysis in Fund 109, which is Conservation Futures, for the program maintenance and operations. And I identified 4 positions that I am reducing collectively as one FTE in reassigning to other funds with having their assignments follow that. And that helps us maintain no more than 25% being utilized for operations. And there are some slides in here that go into detail of Conservation Futures. So one of that is the recreation supervisor doing more permitting and focusing on things happening on the Foothills Trail and off of Conservation Futures properties. The other ones are some management and administrative positions that will have less oversight associated with Conservation Futures sites and program management. The next 3 are kind of combined and a fun thing to explain. Our construction project managers, they are solely responsible for moving forward the projects. We have 5 current FTEs associated with construction project management in terms of positions. We were authorized a 6th, a limited duration position that expires the end of this biennium. The reality with the market is we were never able to fill that position. So we really have been operating under the 5. We are asking, and that's the add a new one, asking for a 6th one that doesn't have the limited duration qualifier with it and is one that we are able to go out immediately and seek hiring for, so that we can have a full complement of 6 FTEs who are doing project management. We have a number of different special revenue funds that go specifically into capital and are used for this development. We had an FTE in the Park Impact Fee Fund, and I think from part of our prior conversations and that discussion was had about people being uncomfortable with an FTE being specifically assigned with one of those revenue funds. What this would do is actually have the benefits in non-project time for construction project managers all being funded in park sales tax, but the rest of their time will be associated with the project that they are working on. And the projects that they are working on fall into 2 different fund categories: Fund 312, which is Parks Construction Fund, and the Paths and Trails Construction Fund, which is 324, which is the development of Pipeline Trail, Parkline Trail, right? So those, in your budget book, it tells you the specific projects. So we'll be able, when they're working on it, they will assign their time to those construction funds, and their time will be covered as a direct cost of the project, which is very common best practice of the funds that are funding that project overall. Should I pause for questions on that? Because, and that's all these different numbers are basically making that bottom line change. At the end of the day, we will have 1.75 worth of FTE, which is a piece of 6 different employees in the Park Sales Tax Fund 145. 2.5 FTEs will be funded in 312, which is the Parks Construction Fund, and 1.75 FTE in Fund 324, which is the Path and Trails Construction Fund. You know, collectively, those salaries is about $1 million, and then the benefits, but the benefits are only in park sales tax. There's no benefit or, you know, leave time that will be impacting the construction project funds or the construction projects themselves.
Councilmember Denson.
I don't even know how to ask about this. This is very, very complicated, but But I guess what I need to know overall, because I had this as a question too, is moving the FTEs from conservation futures and park impact fees will help you fund this sixth construction manager. And no. Okay, and also, well, not that. It will also, I guess the end game is that construction projects will move forward better and more efficiently because of the way these individuals' time has been, allotted or directed. They're going to be more working on the construction projects.
So two pieces. I mean, one is, again, because we have a number of funds, the shift out of conservation futures is not about capital. I mean, it protects money that goes to the grant program, but it really is aligning the FTE's time with the operating fund that makes the most sense and is truest to that funding source. So this is how we pay people's salary. It's not about an efficiency per se. When their time is associated with a project, when we have grant money coming in, we're able to bill back and recover more of those funds. The reality is, we'll get into the capital where we are now, is that like I said, we didn't fill the limited duration. We've accomplished about 80% of a capital program, but we've been generally at 60% capacity because we've had unfilled positions. We didn't get 2 positions filled till the end of 2022, and then we had 2 people resign, so we're at 50% capacity today. And we'll highlight, how that has impacted the program. So funding positions makes it possible to have 6 bodies, and we want to do everything to get 6 bodies in and carry 6 bodies through the biennium. How we pay for them is not having an unfair burden on one of these special revenue funds, and allows us to really calculate and demonstrate their time and their time impact on an individual project.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, I guess we're back to the list, right?
Can you just clarify how many construction managers are in the proposed budget?
There is 6. So the 5 current regular positions, and then one that was a limited duration this time. So we've actually made it the 6th a permanent position, knowing that the not only biennial budget, but the 6-year, you saw the 6-year in the 15-year capital program shows a sustained demand for projects and project management.
And how many are on board today?
3.
3 humans work for you today doing construction project management, and so you'd be looking for recruiting 3 more in the next biennium.
So we have one that we're making an offer to now. The construction project manager, who also does supervision, that is posted as of right now. And the limited duration is on hold pending approval to actually have funding for that position in the next biennium. We might, if it is approved, we have a pool, right, of candidates right now, so we might be able to expeditiously get that person into the position, but we have been unable to attract and offer somebody a position that will expire December 31st.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have more decision packages on the list, and we referred to some of these, so I think it'll just show you the financial impacts of that. So on the next slide, we move from that construction group to the recreation coordinator for the specialized recreation in rentals. And again, these are positions that are funded by revenues, that allows us to keep our commitments when it comes to fulfilling event permits and also our contracts with specialized recreation. Right now, we've been trying to fill and utilize extra hires, but that is a very inconsistent. So some of that extra hire funding is allowing us to support this position overall. So there's not any new resource in terms of subsidy that is part of these requests. But by having career positions that are primarily funded by the grants, partnerships, and contracts, we are able to get a more quality product going forward, especially to our high high-need populations. The specialized recreation population is a really important one. And then also how we'll be doing things that I'll talk about in a moment to serve youth consistently. So as I mentioned, the Planner 2 for us is really a crucial position this biennium because we are going into the PROS plan update, not just assistance with that, which our strategic planner will utilize some contracted assistance for, but it's because we are at a crucial time to identify all of our new park properties to fill service gaps, to negotiate with those partners. The school district is interested in partnering in some of those. We need partnership discussion in related to those sport fields and where we might be locating those and how we might jointly operate some of those. The master plans that need to be done and be submitted for us to get grant funding for our new park locations that are listed in the CFP as it exists. So this is a body of work that cues. Right, we have to have the preliminary stuff. This is what then becomes what the design and permitting work becomes, which then leads into the capital construction projects and future biennium. And this is to support us not just through the PROS plan right now, but knowing that we have 15 years of other projects that have to be queued up and ready to move forward. So it really is somebody under the strategic planner's tutelage and direction, which will help get that body of work moving forward so that as we finish our current 18 construction projects this biennium, we have new ones ready to take that place, and you'll see that in a moment. Okay. The youth development coordinator, as mentioned, 75% grant funding, but it allows us to fill a position and be very consistent. We need to deliver products back to those grant funders, but this position is the one that will also be managing the scholarship program and processing that and providing the data on how many low-income families we are able to support. There's a very small correction. As I mentioned before, there's 0.10 in an FTE that got dropped out of the golf course fund. It's part of my park specialist who works with that contractor and takes care of the building. So it's a representation of 1/10 of their time. They are a whole human being, and they have been fully funded, but that piece of them was not represented. So it's really a technical correction in the budget overall. We did ask for an increase in the amount of money that we have been utilizing for sheriff support, and we have that plan that I expressed to you. So that is an increase in the solution we would love to see move forward. And the last one is an expenditure bottom line increase to introduce some new programs. These are all related specifically to general funds, so changing the general fund bottom line, but it does have the revenues associated with those new programs that go with it.
Dr. Miles, before you move off this slide, I'm trying to really make sure we understand your request for a new Planner 2 to support master plans, PROS, plan update, and partnership projects. How many planners are funded in the current biennium?
Yeah, go ahead. Planner is a classification that is used universally, but doesn't necessarily define the work, the specific work that the person does. So there is a strategic planner, and then there's a trails planner who's a trails coordinator, and they are primarily the ones that help queue up for our capital. The Conservation Futures Planner is dedicated to Conservation Futures, but that's a planner position as well. And then our Natural Lands Steward is in the planner classification, but she's Natural Lands. And the forester that reports to her is also considered a planner. So that you might see planner in a whole lot of places, but they're very specialized in what they do, and they have that.
That's helpful. The planners doing planning in this regard, teeing up master plans, doing planning type work for park facilities that's not construction management, the work before construction management. How many of those do you have?
Two.
Two.
And again, one is committed to the trail, and then one has strategic plan and master plans for everything else.
Two. And is one of those, we know some of your staff and trying to orient ourselves. Tiffany Odell, is she
Yes.
one of those two?
She's the strategic planner.
Thank you.
that has the main body of work, and I would say Fund 312 and every new master plan falls under her. Brianne Blackburn is our trails coordinator, so she's a planner. And her function is to get all the trails and, our partnership with Tacoma Public Utilities and all of the new trail locations, easements lined up so that we can get to the capital. But those are the only two committed to the capital program.
Thanks for helping us understand that. Councilmember Coover.
Thank you, Chair. I just was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on the last one for the outdoor learning program, Light the Lake, and for the arena surface.
Yeah. So those are expense, again, authority we're looking to grow on. Now, the outdoor learning program, we submitted a grant for what's called outdoor learning through the state of Washington and OSPI. We actually did not get the full grant, but we will be looking at how to do an after-school program for youth at Frontier. Without the grant, it's going to be a little bit more fees associated, but we're hoping we can get the scholarship program up to help provide more access. The Light the Lake is a regional event. If you've been to some that you are lanterns and lighting in memoriam of others, it'll be similar but different to one of those type of events. And we had talked with fees and charges, having an extra hire dedicated for doing the arena surfacing maintenance because of the increased drop in use there is we need the expense capacity to pay the person, and then the fees and charges are going to help offset the cost of that salary.
Is there anything that kind of prevents maybe a volunteer in doing that? Or I would think that perhaps the employees might fight to do that because it's kind of therapy to ride the tractor, listen to music, and till the dirt.
Yeah.
So it just seems like maybe an expense that isn't needed.
There's a current labor agreement for the park maintenance staff.
Okay. Thank you.
Ready to move on?
Okay. Yes, and we're ready for so these are the FTE changes. So it's going to sound a little bit duplicative because these really were the decision packages, and most of them had to do with FTEs. But I know you're all doing the math up there, so I want to help with that. In our general fund specifically, we did reduce 1.1 FTE, and that had to do with meeting our budget reduction. And so our request is to shift those folks to other funds that are more appropriate. There is also those 2 communications staff members who have been housed in my department. They're actually going to be reassigned to communications. So your book shows that there was a reduction of 3.1. Those are really, bodies are not disappearing, they are shifting to other locations. But we are asking for the recreation coordinator to do specialized recreation. So that's adding a 0.5 back, which is a net reduction of 2.6 in the general fund for parks in terms of FTEs. Should I say that again?
Well, the humans are moving to communications to do communications for Parks and Recreation Services.
Yes, they've actually been overseen by the communications staff and placed in our department. They were budgetarily within our department. Now budgetarily, they are being shifted in the budget upon your approval to being actually FTEs in communications.
Vice Chair Campbell.
How many are moving over?
2.
2. So you're moving those 2 general funded positions out of parks
Yes.
over to communications, which is general funded. And then you're adding what in their place?
And I'm also moving 1.1 out, 0.6 of that to Chambers Bay Golf Course, 0.5 of that to park sales tax. So 3.1 moving out,
Okay.
0.5 new FTE coming in, which is the piece of the FTE that's going to be supporting the specialized recreation programs growth to serve more users in our partnership with other jurisdictions.
On the surface, it may appear to be a cut, but we're actually adding a half a person.
Yes. Yeah. It takes the reduction from reducing 3.1 to a net reduction of 2.
Well, it may take it from your general fund impact, but not our general fund.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Again, I know you all were into the math today, so I wanted to make sure I put that out there. Okay, the shift collectively of the construction project managers from them being in park impact fees, 1, and the other 5 in park sales tax exclusively, to now being spread across park sales tax and the construction funds. In the 1.75 park sales tax, 2.5 construction fund, and 1.75 paths and trails equals 6. So it includes the 5 existing bodies plus continuing the limited duration and having a 6th. And the CFP you're going to see is right now currently allocated across 6 bodies in terms of workload for 24-25. Okay, the planner 2. So we just discussed that change and how that one in particular will support the work of the 2 existing planners that do strategic planning and trails planning to keep those moving. The 2 new recreation coordinators, one specifically focused on youth in doing our grant-funded youth program in the scholarship program, and the other one split between specialized recreation and rentals and events at the Chambers Creek Regional Park. The change out of the collective 1 FTE from Conservation Futures, that does impact 4 staff members. 0.25, one of those staff members will be reassigned to the Paths and Trails Operating Fund, which is how we maintain and program the Foothills Trail. The other 3 will be reassigned to park sales tax, because that is what's funding the rest of the body of work that they will be focusing on. Well, very good. And correct the park specialist, again, that point, one of them that was not recognized in the last budget will be recognized. They already are current 1 FTE, but we're only budgetarily listed as 0.9. Questions on that? Oh, all right. Okay, so some of these were some early questions we wanted to make sure we included. Conservation Futures is Fund 109 in terms of the operating fund. There are 7.2 FTEs associated with that fund that fall into 3 buckets. So the first part really is administrating the overall program, and which is tied then to the acquisitions that happen through our grant cycle, and that's the top number that you see. Within state law, up to 25% can be used for maintenance and operations of sites that are purchased with Conservation Futures funding. So that second 2.25 are all associated with Meridian Habitat, and at the time that was purchased and the bond was taken out, that was the operating decision for how this site would be operated and maintained moving forward. And there's 2.25 FTEs now after we've made the 1 FTE reduction associated with that. And the forestry and conservation site is when our natural lands group are working specifically on our acreage that we have purchased through Conservation Futures and doing the care of those sites. So in the budget, what you see for 24-25, and what I highlighted in blue is the anticipated tax revenue is $10.745 million. 75% of that would be $8 million. in being that we have committed to sending the 75% to go towards capital, and debt is included in that capital. You'll see that the transfer out and debt collectively is budgeted at 8.5 million, so we have exceeded that 75% threshold. The allocation of 25% of that 10.745 million being available for maintenance, operations, and programming would be on the far right, $2.686 million. We have 2.625 budgeted, so there's 60,000 less than the 25,000 threshold that we have capped those expenses at.
Councilmember Denson.
You're definitely getting your mouth today.
Right. Yes, thank you. So I know we can use up to 25% legally for operations and maintenance.
Of sites purchased
Of
through
sites
Conservation
purchased.
Futures.
So is that happening here, or is some of that 25% going towards planning, recreation, things like that? Is that 25% all going to maintenance and operations, like I would think of maintenance and operations?
So programming is part of the operations of the site. So it is specific activities of that park site and facility. What is also included is the Conservation Futures Planner. So we've included in that 25% any activities related to administration of the program plus operating of the sites.
Okay, and I absolutely understand that obviously it's a complicated program to operate and administer, and getting the contracts and the purchase and sale agreements done and all of that. Does the department have a goal, though, of trying to lessen that percentage to like 20% or 15% over time so that we can put more money into capital acquisitions? Or is that something you guys are talking about?
It is not currently, and it's a part, is the statute allows for 25% just of the maintenance and operations of sites, so the bottom two. What we did last biennium is actually brought the program in under that. So that's been the policy direction that we have been following. We haven't been looking to do further reductions, but of course, are open. If there's conversations, the question becomes, how do these other things become funded if we want to go further beyond what the statute allows?
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up, Director, in this staffing summary of 7.2 FTEs in the Conservation Futures Fund, only 0.75, only 3/4 of an FTE is for parks maintenance, it seems, of Conservation Futures properties. That seems low with the amount of Conservation Futures properties we have. As I interpret the staffing summary, there's a lot more recreation programming being paid out of the Conservation Futures Fund than there are folks maintaining property acquired through Conservation Futures. Can you confirm that we're reading the staffing summary correctly, and can you help us reconcile that? Why wouldn't we pay for the recreation programming through another fund that's more appropriate, in my opinion, more appropriate for recreation programming, and reserve funds for maintaining these properties? You have this asset that you have to maintain. I expect you to maintain it well. It just seems like you're spending more on recreation out of this fund than maintaining these properties.
True. So that's part of the operations profile, is how to program and provide public access at the site. One of the things to look at is that the budget is actually, see the charges for service, it's not a huge amount, but a lot of the time that is there, those staff are actually bringing in the revenues and managing the activities and use of the facility as well. So this profile, again, going back, it was set up at the time that it was determined as a policy statement that if this particular property came into the inventory, this is how it would be
And we're talking about
managed.
Meridian Habitat Park.
Yes, Meridian Habitat. And the other properties kind of fit under that forestry and conservation piece.
A little bit of I keep hearing a response from you, a little bit of a legacy decision
Yes.
that's being carried forward here in terms of spending recreation dollars on Meridian Habitat Park out of the Conservation Futures Fund.
But in part, I mean, as you noticed, it was a .75. Even though staff might be located there and they serve there, if they are working to a different location, not only is there allocation, but they charge their time to activities that are another site, so that their time obligation and burden is limited to what they're doing to operate Meridian Habitat.
Thank you. Councilmember Coover.
Thank you, Chair. There's so many moving pieces. My understanding on the 25%, that would be for, if we acquired a property for trails, and the maintenance would be if the trail needed to be maintained, that would come from the 25%?
So again, the RCW allows for us to use up to that amount of the new proceeds, as long as the site was actually purchased through Conservation Futures and has active operations of it. That's a qualifying thing. We have more, as we'll look, more sites that have been purchased through Conservation Futures, but the decision to include more operations and expenses appears to be really limited to Meridian Habitat and not other sites. And as you pointed out, that was the legacy coming in. We've made some shifts to it. But if there's interest in different direction, we just need to know how to fund those things. So each of my parks are associated with different funds, right? And so we try to keep that pretty pure in order to give good data back. And we are limiting charges to Conservation Futures funds to those that qualify and those that have been identified there. And we are utilizing another fund, park sales tax, for forestry and other lands and similar work that happens on properties that were not purchased through Conservation Futures. So if we didn't budget to care for a site in this fund, we would be caring for it out of the other park sales tax fund.
Okay, so like at Spanaway Park, when they had the trees that had died, and so that would have been through the park sales tax in caring for that problem.
Yes,
That kind of thing.
yeah.
And then the piece of property on the north side of Frontier that was purchased with Conservation Futures. And so maintenance on that property could be used with the 0.25% of what was used to pay for that parcel.
If it's associated with Frontier, which is a general fund park, we would try to take care of all of its maintenance universally through its primary fund, general fund, and we would only be turning to forestry if they needed to come in and do something special. So the regular maintenance of all of Frontier is on its primary fund.
Okay.
We try not to pull out tasks and assign different tasks to different funding source and try to keep each park as whole as possible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Morel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just following up on the conversation on Habitat Park. I'm assuming historically that was purchased with Conservation Futures dollar entirely?
Yes, I believe so. I will verify that for you. I know it was one of the anchor properties of the bond, so I think it was collectively purchased with that, and I don't know that. And the bond has been in repayment. That's one of the pieces of this, but that will expire the end of this biennium as well. But it was definitely the bond. And, as part, when you acquire new properties, you have to answer the question of how are you going to maintain and take care of the property. And that was, again, the policy decision at that time is that it would be taken care of, including the staff that were operating it and programming it through this fund.
And so we're taking almost 25% out to run maintenance. Does the 2.25 FTEs, do they do work on other parks, or is it just Meridian?
If they do works on other parks, which they do, like the staff who's assigned there will also take care of the Nathan Chapman Trail because it's close, right? and go over and assist at Heritage. When they do that, or even the percent, they are charging their time somewhere else.
So they clock in, clock out, or however.
Yeah, we have a time management system in terms of funds and where they code their time. So they might be budgeted there, but they're always going to code their time to the park location in the fund that funds that park, so we can get a good record of the maintenance there.
Yeah, because I do see the same staff at Heritage over at South Hill or the Habitat Park, so they just kind of flow, and I couldn't imagine how you keep track of all those different time allocations. But as far as the conservation funds, does that have to go with the property forever? Or can we buy
Yes.
out that or change that?
In general, they're put on to be covenants and easements that restrict forever. I think there are some provisions that allow payback of what was paid for that restriction, but there are nuances and rules that go with that as well. It's a
Okay.
process.
And as Council Chair Mello said, there's some of the recreation programs are funded. What, can you give me an idea what recreation program is funded out of this?
Yeah, so part of it, it's an association of staff time, so they do nature hikes, nature-based camps at the site for the community, and also then what they create. There's now a new outdoor classroom at Meridian Habitat for those activities. This is one of the sites that really got some of the very first investment of the increased park impact fee dollars in 2018 in order to start opening up the site for people to come in. And I know that's one of the conversation is what's public access from purely natural viewing to be able to walk through, to be able to have a full program experience. And that's what was determined for this location.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair Kimball.
Because we went into thank you, Chair, because we went into a lot of conversations about the specialists and technicians and the people who are kind of maintaining the properties, do we have a certified arborist on staff?
Yes. So our natural land steward, Jessica, is an arborist and our forester, and we have another qualified forester as well. So we end up not only taking care of our 5,200 acres, but we're the experts for other county properties that are timbered or not developed.
Well, and not just timbered, but taking care of just trees in the general park landscape. Limbs have to be cut at certain angles, certain
Yes.
weight distributions. Lots of study goes into becoming a certified arborist to maintain trees in a safe way. Are all of our trees in our parks being inspected regularly for safety?
They are.
Okay.
And we're developing management plans. The foresters are developing those plans, which include health checks, but then also what we need to do to protect them, keep them healthy.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Councilmember Campbell, for bringing the forestry program.
Yeah.
Obviously, Pierce County owns a lot of forest area. In my area, you have quite a few acreage.
1,700.
Have we advanced our forest management programs to the point we're actually harvesting and getting any type of an income off our forest plans?
We have not yet. That is part of the management plans that are coming forward. While we own a number of the lands, we don't have good access to many of the properties that would allow that to happen. But part of their overall assessment is where harvesting would be appropriate, when and how we would be able to do that.
And when might we see those plans?
Yeah, I'll ask them to share a list of which sites have those plans and
Okay,
where we think we can
thank you, Mr. Chair.
accomplish that.
Thank you. Director, I'm going to ask you to move to the next through slides as quickly as you can. I want to reserve as much time on the capital program while we
Absolutely.
have you here in person.
This is kind of informational you can take. We had a number of properties that we have purchased, actually 26 of open space properties that the county has purchased through Conservation Futures. There's 14 of them in the first two columns there, or 54%, that do have formal access, and a lot of times that means it's a park site or it has a trailhead for people to be able to get into, or it's connected to an active park. There are 35%, that are informal, which we just call, it's being used by the neighbors primarily, but we're not at a place that we have the infrastructure to open it. But you can see next to all of those that there is a opening plan in progress, and we're associating dates where we see over the next couple bienniums, and that's where our foresters and our Washington service crews are really crucial for that particular work. In the middle of the last column, it says natural buffer lands. Those three underneath are really lands that are more environmentally protected and probably don't have a high expectation for public access. We will be, a big focus this year was updating the Conservation Futures Code and getting the cycle going forward. Our Conservation Futures planner, Conservation Futures coordinator, will be doing a monitoring plan in the next biennium to really give you a robust look at all the properties, regardless of ownership, that have come in under this program. Okay, so next one.
I'll ask you to pause briefly. Councilmember Coover?
Thank you, Chair. Is the Nisqually River Interpretive Center the property in Roy? McKenna?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, next is some of the DEI highlights. I think there's answers to your specific questions, but I would just highlight that youth programming, what we have done to evolve the number of targeted and intervention programs in high-need areas of the community is an important one, and that ties into the scholarship program and expansion that we are looking to do in the next biennium with your support. The Washington Service Corps program is an entry-level program. It is very attractive to young adults who are trying to figure out what they might want to do, 18 to 24. We definitely have a very diverse group, and we do a lot of mentorship and development with that group, so when they leave, they are on track to find a career. So we want to continue that program. We definitely also use the equity index, the fiscal policy for direction, and all the demographic analysis that we do as part of the Park Recreation and Open Space Plan in order to determine our capital investments overall. So that's our sound planning document, and we really call out those strategies to make sure we are elevating and understanding the needs in high-need communities and that they're getting their fair share of investment. With each master plan, we also do outreach, and this is where the online tools of the Equity Index and looking at demographics is really important and helps us identify all the members of the community who live in the target radius of that new development and set up an outreach plan that is very specific to engaging them, working with networking agencies, working with partners and schools so that we can really get as broad-based a public involvement. And if we don't see diversity in our involvement and we know there's a large community living there, we will do focus groups and we will do specific things to engage that population in the discussion. Okay. With that, we'll move into capital projects. So these capital projects are all in progress now. You'll see next to many of them that they are under contract. They are either in design or have been through design and permitting to really be in the finish line of what we have intended to accomplish in 22-23. As you know, projects don't end abruptly with the New Year's bell. So these are all ones that we knew we would be moving forward in 22-23. Some of them we wished we were going to be more at the finish line by the end of this year, but they're going to carry forward. I think as we talked about with our capacity, we feel we're 4 to 6 months behind in getting all of them through to the bidding places where we wanted them to be. But we will be finishing these projects as first priority and have included their carry forward in the CFP. On the next slide, 15, the top three, through Sprinkler Outdoor Improvements, I think you know that's a huge project. That project has been slated to be done about May of next year. That's all on track. So again, those are three that are continuing forward through the biennium. There are other projects then listed there that were added and we are bringing into 2024, that many of them started late or will be starting that we didn't get to start this year because of some of those capacity and permitting issues. So the NPDS permit work is part of that. But our Sprinkler Indoor, we've been doing a lot of work to figure out what the community wants so we can put together a phase 1 project. The water improvements, all these safety facets are one that we have starting next. As these projects that are in progress come to close, they are the ones that were already identified for 23-24 to move underway. As I mentioned, we have done an offer for one of the CPM3s. We hope that is a great pool for hiring the limited duration carryover in the supervisor position that also manages projects is currently out. That gets us into slide 16 where we really start getting to what was already planned for or have we been doing the background on to position doing the planning work so that we can move into design into this biennium coming up. Some of these are going to see completion in 24-25, but others are also going to extend into 26 again because of that permitting window and us taking the time to come to agreement on design. Notice that community centers and sports facilities are on there. As I mentioned, we just did actually a couple summits with school districts and with community members to figure out what the sport field need is so that we can have that be a very strong data set next year as we are rebuilding our pros plan and know what the partnerships, know what the needs are. It's one thing to say we need more fields per capita, but to know what sports activities and who will be served by them is a much broader conversation. So getting these all positioned so they're at a point of readiness in 26 to 28 is one of our goals there. The final slide then looks at some new planning and design initiatives. They are the ones already prioritized to pick up on the heels on the others. These really are, again, some of the important decisions that are going to allow us to define a dollar amount when we update the CFP next and to have concrete funding in terms of grants and concrete funding needs in terms of allocations moving forward. So our planners in particular work very closely with the project managers on the ones on these slides to launch these efforts with good outreach and to make sure we have master plans and answers to the questions of what we are building and why. We're one of the very unique departments in that the community gets to tell us exactly what to build and what they prefer to see in their park location. Part of that in the bottom, I summarized a little bit, but many of those are things that might not be things that are assigned to a construction project manager, but there's a cost. There's a cost to the pros plan, as came up earlier. There's some hard costs at the natural lands team in order to open a property. While the crews might put in the trails, we still need signage, we need parking, we need other built assets, trash cans, those things that go in place that are going to allow us to open those natural lands property that you saw on the other slide. You know, there's also some assets that have gotten to the end of their life that are big enough and they need engineering design that we've needed to identify some capital funding in order to do that repair and replacement. And while our planned maintenance team does a lot of the small stuff, some of them have to be elevated to our capital team in order to do the contracting and engineering on. A summary slide, the next one kind of shows, as I mentioned, the life cycle of projects in 24-25 based on what's in the current CFP. We will be having 6 new projects enter into planning and feasibility in 2024. 9 enter into that in 2025. So that's 15 projects that are beginning their life. And again, that's a huge body of work to make sure we have a Plateau Park master plan and a Gagne master plan ready for future investment Design and engineering, we have 13 in that phase, starting that phase, and then it's 7 more that will enter into that phase in 2025, and then 8 that are currently in building and construction as we go into the year, but 10 more will be going into construction in 2025. So it gives you a kind of a breakout of how all of our projects look in terms of life cycle and advancing them throughout the process.
Let's pause to take questions about the CFP. Councilmember Denson?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I apologize. I have a student-parent-teacher conference happening soon, so I'm going to have to run out at noon exactly. Can't be late for these because the parents are backed up. So real quickly, I have 2 questions. Devil's Head.
Yes.
I see at the bottom of that one slide, it says Devil's Head opening plan. So does that mean that we're going to have a plan by the end of 2025, or it's going to be open at the end of 2025?
The goal is to be open by end of 2025 because we get a plan. And again, with these, they're beautiful sites. The site itself doesn't need much work. Access to them, whether it's county roadway or agreement with a private partner, those are all the things that we are working out in the first year so that we can execute the opening in the second year.
Okay, and I think I saw on the CFP that there was 200,000 in the budget for that. Is that going to be enough to get it open? That doesn't seem like enough.
Well, we will know.
Once you have a plan.
That's our estimate at this time, as all these are, right?
Okay. And then my other quick question is about the 2 Metro Park districts that I have on the other side of the bridge, so Key Penn and Penn Met. In the past, we've had them included for some project dollars based on impact fees and our evaluation of impact fees, their percentage collected in that area. I don't see the Peninsula projects or anything in the Peninsula other than the Devil's Head project in here or any contributions to the park districts. Can you just speak to that?
Well, the current PROS plan has a trail allocation in the future. When we are having the conversations for next year, right, to update the plan, we'll have those conversations about the best investment and how we might partner with those investments. I would encourage, Chair, if you have any capacity, I think a study session on the fiscal policy and park impact fees and what the current county code is would be very helpful for the council as a whole, because I've definitely heard different interpretations, and I think needs to be an understanding of what the policies currently are so that the council can decide if you want to change them, because it's very clear that there's a one service area policy, and I think there's some rationale behind why that got established that would help you guys navigate some of these questions.
Okay, we will follow up on that. Councilmember Denson, we know you need to get to your son's parent-teacher conference. Thank you for prioritizing that for a little bit. Anything else?
Thank you so much.
Ms. Freeman, I saw you turn your camera on. Did you have anything to support the director's answer on?
Oh, I just want a really quick correction, and Roxanne, I apologize. We are actually doing design of Devil's Head in 24-25 and a little bit of public outreach with neighbors, and then the construction funding is for 2026. That's the way it's currently scheduled in the CFP.
Thank you. A lot of moving pieces. Councilmember Hitchin.
Thank you, Chair. Excited to see the Parkland Community Trail in there, but then there was a Parkland Community Trail future connection, and what is that? Like, where are we going?
That would be the answer to that question.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Which
it's
is definitely a design section in figuring out the routing and connections that are most important.
Okay, because I know one of the things that I'd seen, since it's called Parkland, is trying to get across Pack Ave into Spanaway. So we have a pathway from the Spanaway community to Sprinker, one of our largest complexes. And since it was called Parkland, I was like, you going to, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Okay. My second question is around the Lakewood Community Center. I know that we've had significant issues, including essentially closures. See, it's in here. It's a small dollar amount. So, small construction amount, I guess.
Yes.
Can you just explain like where that is and what the plan is as far as getting that open?
So right now we're operating the facility, just not the wing.
Okay.
Right? What is in there is repair funding in order to sustain the facility for 5 more years. We had several partnership conversations about whether there should be a wholesale reinvestment to sustain that facility longer. But we didn't find anyone deeply passionate about that strategy. So part of the reason that you see our work at Sprinker and at Meridian Habitat identifying the capital improvements that we need there is our ultimate goal would be able to relocate specialized recreation out of Lakewood Community Center into Sprinker or Meridian Habitat when we have those facilities ready to receive that program. And a lot of that direction came out of the conversation where Meridian Habitat and Sprinker are our county focus and facing programs out into the mass unincorporated areas. And Lakewood being inside Lakewood, there was a determination about where they wanted to be and if they wanted to co-invest, and it was not something that they wanted to do at this time. So what you do see in the CFP is really sustain it, make it occupiable until we divest and move out of that property. We just don't see that happening during this biennium. We need to make the other investments so that we have a home that is a good home for this specialized recreation program that's countywide.
And is Lakewood Parks one of the entities that
They do.
connect with us for our specialized rec? Okay. Okay. And I'm going to assume Councilmember Kruger is going to ask this, but I'm just going to ask. The Frontier Horse Arena, is it actually going to be finished in 2024, 25? Like really honestly done?
So it was put on pause in order to have some funding conversations. We have now concluded those and have it going, moving forward to the next stage of design so we can look at what we can afford to build with what is currently allocated and then what the future potential is. But that will be picked back up by a construction project manager when I fill a vacant seat.
Okay, thank you. And she may have more specific questions, but I just know I don't have any. Oh, okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To follow up with Councilmember Denson's comments, we collect park impact fees and second REIT. We collect those in all unincorporated areas. So over in the Key Peninsula, we collect that fee
Yes.
even though it's in a park district. Is that correct?
Yes.
Same thing with the REIT?
Yes.
Okay. And there's nothing in this budget that we're crediting or giving back to those geographic areas?
There is not.
Okay. Was that part of your policy comment, or?
That is. And
Okay.
just briefly, and I think you want to, is that it accrues to the county per code, right, for the county park system. And our county park system lays on top, right, or complements a city, town, or park district. They have their own funding for their local park system. So it really is meant to accrue to us. And if you, the park impact fee rate that is being collected is based on the value of the county park system across the board. So a new resident, whether they're in your district or area, and I think part of this is there's one service area. We have management areas, and we talk about the region so we can really relate to the public, but there is no governance to separate the money. If you do that, a few things happen. One is it slows down the rate, but part of the reason I think the original Park Impact Fee Group, and when it came forward, raised the question because it had to do with fairness. Since we are primarily a regional provider, we know people come all the way across the system. So when that money is collected, wherever it is, it's because that new resident is going to have an impact on the county system across the board. If you actually retain it in an area, you're saying that resident no longer has to contribute to the Foothills Trail, to Sprinker, to anything else that they might use. By separating, you also then say, okay, because you have a Sprinker, right, it could drive a situation where you're saying, okay, central region residents, you're solely responsible for all the capacity improvements because it resides there, right? And since we don't have the same amount of regional elements everywhere, we wouldn't want to make one region responsible for a regional asset that everyone else is going to use, or the same to say, oh, we need a new one. They're going to have to fully fund a new regional asset in the south, but everybody else can still come use it. So that was probably the biggest driver as to why people raised that question and set up a standard of one service area, because the entity can define what that is. But to put any one fund into a provider that is generally a local provider, even if they offer something regional, you're also saying that that amount or that new resident in their area no longer has an obligation to contribute to the rest of the county system that they might be utilizing.
Okay. I understand when that was put in place, there were no park districts really in the discussion. But that being said, I know that traffic impact fees are paid based on a zone. And we do not say people from Parkland cannot go to South Hill and use our roads, or vice versa, or we can't use a ferry because we're not in that zone. So I'm just kind of curious about the overlay between traffic impact fees and park impact fees and the policy discussion that I think this council needs to have on that. Also, you know, when those districts came online, we divested quite a few projects over on that side of the bridge, did we not?
Yep, mini transfer channel, there's still some in ownership. Devil's Head is a
Devil's
great
Head,
example
right.
of Purdy.
And is there a
Smith.
reason why we're retaining that one?
At the time when it wasn't negotiated at the time, and we've had some conversation about joint maintenance and ways we work together, but they as an entity haven't expressed a willingness to take those items on. So it may be a viable conversation, it just hasn't been to this point.
Okay, one last question, Mr. Chair. It pertains, and congratulations on the pipeline trail and the ribbon cutting. Now, it's my understanding that TPU owns the property,
Yes.
and we just have a interlocal agreement to use it. And is that unique to Pierce County?
So Kimberly might help with this. My understanding, it's a renewable 50-year lease. I think TPU has been very open, and they have several other agreements. They've kind of led the way, but not every utility is as open to that. Kimberly, would you correct or add?
Yes, yes, thank you. We do. We have a 50-year easement with TPU. And it's the first agreement that we have like that in Pierce County. Councilmember Morale, as you're aware, we've had discussions with Cascade Water Alliance, but they haven't been willing to grant us any kind of an easement. And if they're not willing to grant us an easement, then we're unable to construct on their property. So, but with TPU, they were willing, and we also have plans and hopes for doing similar agreements with Bonneville Power in the future.
Okay, so you now have a template that you can use that the utilities have agreed to, that kind of takes them out of the risk factor.
Yeah. Hopefully it helps, to your point, for another one to know that TPU has successfully done this for a while and under what terms.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Vice Chair Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Freeman, you gave us an update on Devil's Head that was a little different than what Director Miles had said to Councilmember Denson. Let's make sure she gets that in writing, because she had left the meeting before new information was given. I want to make sure
Absolutely.
she's
Yep.
on the right page with that. I had three questions. I'm forgetting one of them, so I'll go to the third one, which is Frontier Goat Barns and state appropriation. So what does that mean?
Yeah. So there's, I think it's called a Spanaway Frontier and Lake Spanna Golf Course are the oldest in our inventory. And the goat barns are in need of repair. And initially, there was a request to change, add gutters or fix the roof, but the support structure itself completely needs to change. So there was a request to the state, and Senator McCune did an allocation to allow us to work with the community and the Fair Board to come up with a design that honors the heritage of the site, but actually change the structure, and hopefully change the structure in a way that works for the fair as well as makes them good picnic shelters and functional throughout the year for other things. So money for design has been allocated for that, and that's another project we're looking to pick up, where we are just getting the contracts from the state in terms of merging two different allocations into one.
And how much was the state allocation?
You know, one was like 68 and 77, so I think collectively like 175,000.
So it's, okay, so we're putting in 155, so it's not like a 10% match. We're doing like 50% match on this.
Yeah, and it was a direct member allocation, so it doesn't require a match, but we will be, this is really helping us identify and design what needs to be done. When we look at construction of them and making the change, there will likely be county funding involved in that, but we'll have a more specific dollar amount in the future CFP.
And we own Frontier Park, correct?
We do. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Director, I will ask you and your team to follow up that last line item on slide 17, the 29 projects to advance design, permitting, and construction. If we could just get a breakdown of how much is going to each project and what we expect to accomplish by the end of the biennium, if that follow-up could happen.
And actually, that is a summary of everything that came before it. It was referencing the 29 above it. Yeah, so that's not.
That references the slides and all the content before it.
It does, 14, 15, 16, and 17 above. Yeah, apologies. Those are all spelled out, and the other ones we did group because they're smaller ones that.
Thank you. Let me ask you to get through your next slide, and then we're going to see if there's any other questions or comments, because I'm going to break at 12:20 because staff needs, everyone needs a break before we do our 1 o'clock session.
Absolutely. This should be anyway. So the next slide really is what did we reduce out of the general fund? And that was the one fund where we had the mandated reduction. And most of that was accomplished by the FTE transfer about, and that's the 950,000. But the other bullets show you professional services, repairs and maintenance, subscriptions, supplies. We reduced some areas of software, found areas where we have redundancy or felt like there was a better product. So those are our line item reductions in addition to the FTE changes we talked about.
Thank you. Do we have the next slide for our reference. Folks can read it. Mm-hmm. Do any members have any questions about what we've heard in Parks and Recreation Services this morning? Any final questions? Councilmember Morell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had a reoccurring question. On Sprinker, do you have the ice rink?
Yeah.
Is the employees that man that rental and service area, are they Pierce County employees, or do you contract?
So operation staff are all county employees, and we do hire employees to teach our lessons. There are some of those then become independent contractors for any specialized one-on-one classes or lessons. If they want private lessons, they do that with them separately. And then they rent the ice rink to do that. So we're not underwriting their private business.
So the person who meets you at the plexiglass
Yes.
front, are they an employee?
Yes. They are Parks employees.
They're a Parks employee, and they're included in this budget somewhere.
Yes, they are.
Okay. Is that the same with the tennis facility?
No, the tennis is a lease of our facility, so they have their own staff managing the tennis center, which includes some of, the locker room and racquetball courts.
Okay, so you do contract or lease out some of those facilities. Has that worked okay?
Yes. Yeah, I think that has worked well and has met that need. Part of the indoor planning is really evaluating whether a tennis center long-term is the best thing for the Parkland Spanaway community. So we, as we come to a phase one plan, we'll have determinations about what the redevelopment might be and then whether a contract provider or county provision of those services would be most appropriate.
Okay, so you do have a mix of contracted out services for some of your ice rink recreation activity, and then the tennis is fully contracted. So they just pay a base lease for the,
Yes.
or they do pay a base lease to you?
Yeah, and whether
Or do you
there's
just
any-
offer the building and they?
Yes. Yes, they lease. And Kyle, if you're on, we can provide you that, and I
Okay,
think it's
that's-
just based,
yeah.
there might be a revenue share as well, but he can look at it.
Okay. And those tennis courts are convertible to pickleball, right?
Pickleball, that's right. They started offering pickleball.
I won't get off on that one.
Okay.
So thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate the information on that.
Thank you. Director Miles, I'll be asking a follow-up question through Mr. Mr. Kruger, to ask a little bit more detail about the projects that are listed in the CFP and understanding their various stages of implementation. So encourage members to get their questions to Mr. Kruger, hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow, but you're free to do so anytime, of course. But in order for us to stay on schedule, I encourage questions sooner rather than later through Mr. Kruger. One last question. Your department led a partnership grant, I believe it was through the Inflation Reduction Act for forestry. Really pleased to see that you took the leadership to do that. We were not successful, unfortunately. There's another group that was successful that I believe will benefit the Pierce County area. Not sure if you know that, Northwest Youth Corps.
Yes.
We probably don't have time to get into it now, but what do you think we can do? Disappointed we didn't get the grant. It's not your fault, but wondering what ideas you have for how we can do some of what was intended. Maybe some of it's intended through the Northwest Youth Corps.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there will be future opportunities, and we've actually had people at the state reach out because state's got allocation. So we will continue to explore that from every element, and I think in particular, we have an opportunity to do something around tree nurseries at some of our current properties in order to provide what we need at the county properties, but also support the greening of the canopy in areas that are really in need.
There may be some follow-up questions through Mr. Kruger on that item as well to see what we might be able to do this biennium
Right.
with our resources despite not getting that grant, but there's other things in the works as you indicated.
Yes, we will keep pursuing that.
Any closing comments, Director Miles?
No, just thank you for your time and for your support in a time we get it. Huge growth, right? Huge growth and ramping up. I think we've got the people in the direction, and we know it requires a little patience with someone. We had some of the setbacks with changes in classifications of our capital team, but when people get here, they love being here. So we think that's a great thing. It's pretty easy to get passionate behind parks, and we appreciate the passion that you have put forward on our behalf as well.
Thank you. Also want to send gratitude to Mr. Utterback and the rest of the Parks Advisory Council who spends a lot of time advising our Parks and Recreation Services Department on the public's behalf. Thank you for your public service. And Dr. Miles, thank you for being with us and for answering our questions. Again, members, please get your further questions that we can send in writing to the department through Mr. Kruger as soon as possible. We are going to adjourn, and for members' information and staff's information, there is lunch in the break room here. The Tahoma is being used for another purpose, so please let yourself into the break room behind chambers here, and we will reconvene for a 1 o'clock session with Planning and Public Works. We are adjourned.
To work with you, and it's much cheaper to do that than try and build up something new,